Here we go. Hey, Josh, nice to meet you. Thank you so much for joining me on Heart to Help for Victory Life House out of Texas. I love the hat. It looks perfect.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I know that we have been talking for a little bit about what you do, what I do, and how we can work together. But what I'm interested in finding out as we talk about domestic abuse or intimate partner violence, in your experience, and one of the things that you've done throughout your career, which I find fascinating, is that you would actually be one of the guys who helped the women leave. Now, you would drive them to other places, you would pick them up, they would call you directly. How does that work? How does a woman get out of the situation?
So what they did when we were working very closely with our local victim services, they would reach out, whether it be to the officers or to victim services directly. We would either assist them in leaving the house itself, in getting them to a secure location. Sometimes that meant driving them ourselves. That was normally done on a volunteer basis. If there was a security issue or, we thought that, the abuser may follow, sometimes we, in order to not intimidate, we would follow behind. Anyone that wanted to drive them, that was done either by victim services or, other volunteers that worked with that center.
That's awesome. So when they call, was it usually they themselves that would call, a neighbor, family? What was the majority, do you think?
I'd say the majority, it was pretty close between a family member or the victim themselves would finally reach out to that point normally after officers had to intervene on a pretty bad situation. In my experience, that's what I saw the most.
So you mean like intervene? So up until there's actual like physical assault happening,
Yes.
you really don't know very much. And then that's when the victim calls 911 or is that really usually their first choice, 911?
It tends to be what happens first, just because they get scared. It gets them the quickest response for help. There have been some cases that I've been a part of where they've showed up at victim services on their own without having called the police department because they didn't want to deal with it or didn't want to file a charge. And, we respect that as best we can. The main priority was just making sure that they were safe, and getting them, somewhere where they could heal and, get on with their lives, protect them, their children, if there were any children involved in the situation, and just get them out of that situation.
So when they go to victim services, are they required to call the police? Are they file a report of any kind, or how does that work for privacy and whatnot?
They don't have to. It helps with the process and making sure that that we can get them all the help that they need, and basically making sure that we get them justice as far as what's happened to them. There are cases where they didn't want to file. We still do what we can to help. Because like I said, just getting them to a safe place, getting them out of that situation so they can heal and get on with their lives and get to a better point in their life. To me, that's always been the priority. If they want to file charges, and get justice for themselves, that's great. Most cases, I normally will try to get them to file charges, because even if that victim at that point in time leaves and that subject leaves them alone, they're always going to move on to another victim later. They're going to find someone else to victimize. So we do what we can to break the cycle and to stop it where we can and get that documented. So if it does happen again, that gives us a lot more leeway to mess with it the next time if it does happen, unfortunately.
Gotcha. Now, not every town has a safe place to go to go somewhere. There's very small communities. Maybe they have to go to a larger city. What if a victim has she feels like she honestly has nowhere to go? She calls you guys. If she has friends or family nearby, would you take her there maybe as well or instead of?
That's always probably the best solution, is to get them to someone they trust, friends, family, as long as it's out of that immediate household or that situation where that is going on, where the abuse is happening. Um, we have, made sure they've gotten to, other towns. I've even had, I haven't been a part of it, but I've even seen cases where we've managed to pull some funds together and get them out of state to other families. Just like I said, the priority being getting them out of the immediate abusive situation.
Nice. So what happens to the abuser? You get her out. You have like a couple of cars show up. One car takes her, and then the other car takes him to jail, or
If we had to intervene in the situation, normally we get there and there is domestic violence going on. Uh, Arrest will be made. If in Texas, if we get there and see it going on, we can arrest. Even if the victim does not want to file, the state can actually pick up the charge on behalf of the victim if we have the evidence to do so there on site. If they don't, we normally will try to coordinate it if they want to leave and they have reached out where, the abuser has gone to work, for example, then we try to go and get them out of the house at that point. So there is no altercation and it can be done quickly and quietly. And by the time they realize what's going on, we've already relocated the victim.
right? Gotcha. Yeah, I didn't even have a car available to me to leave. So my daughter and her husband came and got me, and we did it while he was at work. We got me out of that house, which was good. And so when does a restraining order come into play, and are those really effective?
Restraining orders, law enforcement, we can't enforce the restraining orders. We push as much as we can for protective orders. Protective orders we can arrest on and we can enforce. Restraining orders here in Texas are more of a civil contempt of court type thing that we really can't enforce. Only a judge can. So we push all the time for protective orders, and our local district attorney, we have an interlocal agreement with Legal Aid Services out of Lubbock, Texas. They will come in and write those protective orders for us, and then we'll get them in and get the judge to sign it. We work with them as much as we can to help out and get the victims to them if we need to.
Does a report have to be filed at the police station before that other order can be put into
Yes,
place?
with a protective order, they require some sort of documentation. In certain situations, we've managed to get it just on what we would call an incident report, documenting that law enforcement has been called, that we do agree, we feel like that this needs to be done. We've reached out on the victim's behalf before and managed to get it done. The safety of the victim, again, with my department and I, has been and will be the priority.
Yeah, that's awesome because we're so scared. We don't know what to do. We're terrified of this guy, and we're just, we don't want to make him any madder.
Right.
We understand. So maybe if we don't do it, he won't come after us. I think there might be a little faulty thinking with that piece of paper. Oh, it's just a piece of paper. At the same time, I think if you could describe how that piece of paper can really actually help them, and it's not a scary process. I'll, we are in such fear, We're also in denial, a little bit of denial. How could this guy, he said he loved me. It must have been my fault. So we take on a lot. He told me it was my fault. I've started believing him. If I hadn't said it that way, if I hadn't burnt the potatoes, if I hadn't, this wouldn't have happened. So we take a lot on ourselves. But that at the same time, there's something in our brain that's saying, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. So with that protective order, how long does it last?
So an emergency protective order is normally what we get at the time, like an arrest is made, for example. We will file an emergency protective order that goes into effect immediately. The subject will not be released from jail until that order is in place to protect the victim. That order is good for a few months. It gives the victim time to, excuse me, it gives the victim time to go through the process to get the full-time protective order in. Those are good for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And then once the full-time protective order is in, it is done. And then they have the option to revisit that at the end of those 2 years. If they still feel that it is necessary, they can reach back out and renew it.
Gotcha. Oh, that's awesome. 2 years. That's a good long time. That's a great amount of time for someone to go through the healing process, get started right away and go through the healing process. I've been gone since 2016, and I would say for every year that you're in it, it takes another year to heal from it. You're going to keep learning about yourself and new triggers, and you don't really know until they happen that they're even there, the PTSD kind of thing. But to learn how to work with that, how to deal with it when it happens, that's so super important. And that's part of where Victory Lifehouse comes in. I want to help the women who've been in that situation. It could have been 20 years ago. It could have been she just got out of the safe house last week, and now she's going, now what do I do? And that's where Victory Lifehouse comes in, and we can help guide them in their new direction that they really want to go. So have you noticed in COVID at all, like an increase, or maybe because they're now with this person all the time, they have less ability to call? Any idea with that?
I haven't seen a significant jump in the stats either way. I think I know COVID was very stressful and still is very stressful on a lot of households. We haven't seen anything that I would say directly related to it. I guess, as you said, the time spent together could be a contributing factor, but in our cases thus far, we haven't had that listed as anything that we felt was a contributing factor.
Okay. Next question. Do you feel like when you've gone on these calls, has alcohol been, what's the mental state of the person who's doing the abusing?
In our area, I would say the number one contributor is alcohol. A very, very close second. We have a large narcotic problem in the area, as I'm sure most every area nowadays does. I would say alcohol is the number one contributor, with narcotics being the second.
I wonder if there's a way to work with politicians or something, if someone has a record, if they get a record because they were under the influence and they've beaten or somehow created this violent situation, and they were under the influence of this drug, which is alcohol. Could we deny them access to put them in a database to not be able to get alcohol at the ABC store? I just thought of that. I have no idea. I don't know if that takes away somebody's civil rights to, they can drink, but they don't have the right to hit someone else, and kill someone else or potentially kill someone else. So what do you think about that idea?
I think it is a good idea. And I know along the same lines, here in Texas, if you're applying for the purchase of a firearm, one of the questions that's asked in the background check is, have you ever been convicted of a domestic violence? Things like that. They try to look at that and screen that in the, purchase of firearms and things in that regard. So I guess that would be along the same lines. It is a good idea.
That's interesting. Well, that's good to know about the background check. So a woman, if she files, but she has to file the complaint for that to go into it. Otherwise, you don't have any record, really, right?
Right. That's right.
So that's good. That's good for everyone to know. Awesome. Well, I think, do you have any questions for me? Is there anything burning on your mind about Victory Lifehouse?
I think the only thing that I would like to add is, here in our area, we've started, we've talked, you and I have talked about, changing the perception, of victims and changing the perception of even the abusers. Something that we've started doing, and I highly recommend it to other agencies and other school districts. We're in the process of implementing law enforcement classes. I do think that it is very important to reach out to the next generation, to the kids, and teach them that it's not okay. We have had magazines published with law publications talking about dating violence, talking about, things to that nature, stalking, human trafficking, things like that, especially human trafficking nowadays. We've reached out a lot, and we're putting that into the schools. I serve as a on the board of directors for the Boys and Girls Club here.
Nice.
We do law enforcement days. I have officers assigned to the schools. We're starting a program now where we're going to start reaching out to the outgoing seniors, the females specifically, talking about, dating violence. Things to watch out for, before you get in that situation, teaching them the things that they can do. Yes, the
Right.
red flags. So we're hoping to get that off the ground in here pretty soon. We've tried it a few times, just speaking here and there, and it's gotten some great results. It's really opened some eyes. We've even got one of our local girls interested in a career in law enforcement because we've come up and spoke. So I'm hoping that will take off, and I definitely encourage it to anybody. So
yeah, it can be even cultural, that men normally are the ones, percentage wise, who do the abusing, the actual physical abusing part. And there's so much more to abuse than just the physical aspect. For me, I kind of feel like everything ramps up to the physical, all the little things that happen, the financial, the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, all that happens kind of as the groundwork. And then the physical comes into play because they've already destroyed her on all these other levels. Then now it's just becoming a visualization of everything else that's happened. It's like the last thing to happen.
Is so focused on watching for the physical that a lot of the times they don't pick up on the red flags for the mental abuse. And that, as you said, will always lead into the physical at some point. Every bad situation escalates at some point. In my experience, whether the victim noticed it or not, the mental abuse was always there first. And it desensitizes the victim, so they're not as shocked as someone that hadn't gone through that when the physical violence starts. And it's just kind of a decompensating process that the abuser will always put the victim through, and they don't know it. So anytime I talk to a victim, I always try to point out the mental abuse, and it's always hard to do because it's a lot harder to pick up on.
And families don't necessarily want to see it. They don't want to hear it. And the one who's being abused is embarrassed. doesn't want to show it. Oh, I've screwed up again. Here I am with this new person, and it's starting all over again. And we don't want to be there, but there is shame. There's also shame, denial, all that goes into it. Now, I think by the time they're the physical part of it in, she's so confused at this point. She doesn't know which way is out, and he's just gotten her to a point of just not knowing which way is up. And then the family comes along and they're shocked because she was such a good actress for so long, which is another way for her to deal with it when she's with him. I was abandoned and isolated. So he was my all. Got all my information from him, be it about me, be it about what was happening in the world. I got super paranoid, went down a lot of different rabbit trails. He introduced me to different like YouTube video type places that were just black holes that, I thought the military was coming after me, and my own government, and that, we're going to go to war with I just was lost, absolutely lost. And then later, his daughter asked me, was that all your idea to be a prepper, or was that Dad's? I'd never even shot a gun before that.
Right.
I was like, yeah, it was your dad's. Well, she didn't believe me. It was everything. So he's able to turn. Yeah, well, look at her. This is how she is. Well, he created me to be like
Right.
this, so it's like this all weirdness thing that we have to figure out how to get out of. And that takes a long time. So I know I would have been super grateful to have someone. I didn't know I was being abused. I didn't know I was being mentally abused. I always knew if somebody hit me, I could leave. It never occurred to me I could leave before that. I didn't understand what mental abuse was, financial abuse, emotional abuse. I had no idea. I did not understand. So education is super key. So I'm very proud of you guys for getting into the school systems and the communities and sharing it. Nobody wants to hear about it. Nobody wants to talk about it. It happens every single day, every minute. And it's super important. So I encourage you guys to keep on going. And thank you so much for your time, Josh.
It's my pleasure.
I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll talk to you soon, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.